What do you do when you've got a floundering game that pretty much no one cares about anymore? Interest, enthusiasm, it dried up years and years ago. People just see it as the butt of jokes now. They're pointing, they're laughing, they're thinking back to better times 20 plus years ago when this IP had some respect. Back then, people would have killed for a Bloodlines sequel, and now, just a few weeks from release, people wish it was dead. Just leave it dead, leave it alone, please. Don't taint this any more than you have to at this point. We just don't care. Keep it all away from us. What do you do as a company, in this case, Paradox, along with the developer, The Chinese Room? How do you generate any sort of hype at this point when no one's really talking about it except to criticize it? Just some sort of passing interest to go, oh, they're still doing that sequel. It still isn't out. What are they doing? Oh, this looks awful. It doesn't even look quite as good as that one from 6 years ago when you first showed it, and then there were development issues and it all fell apart. It looks even worse than that. Who cares? We don't care about this. You want money for this, including for an expansion pass? I don't think so. Keep this away from me. How do you get around that? Well, it seems that Paradox did find the answer. They found a way to do this, which was to create a problem, create a controversy, and then solve that. Solve that very quickly, take it head on, listen to fans, and once you've done that, now it looks like you are listening. You are pro-consumer. You're here for the Bloodlines fans. Everything's okay. There's a reason to get excited once again after no excitement for years and years. This is what it feels like happened, and if you've got no idea what I'm talking about, which should be understandable, as I said, no one's really paying attention to this game. You're not paying attention to the Bloodlines 2 marketing campaign? Come on, where are you? Are you living under a rock? I can't really blame you if you haven't been looking into this one. So what happened is, a few weeks ago, they announced the long-awaited release date of Bloodlines 2, which is, I think, the end of October. It was quite soon from that announcement to when it's coming out in a few weeks. But they also announced something controversial, which was that 2 playable clans that people were quite interested in, they wanted to play as these clans, they were going to be behind a paywall. They were going to be behind the expansion pass, meaning you'd have to pay quite a bit of money to get the full experience. Now, this understandably angered a lot of potential fans. The last stragglers who were still pre-ordering, were still thinking about buying this, they were pissed off. And this isn't something people are used to, given that it's essentially a follow-up to a beloved, cult-following at least, CRPG from 20 years ago. So these are old-school gamers. These are how many people under 40 are interested in this? Probably not that many. I mean, I happen to be one of them, but I was even too young when the game originally came out, really. I played it years later. So not that many people who are used to being nickeled and dimed for every little thing, every tiny DLC everywhere. Not that many of those people are also Bloodlines fans. So to have clans locked behind a paywall, this might be something that Paradox, the publisher, thought they'd get away with because of all their strategy games where that's their thing. To get the complete experience, you're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But most of the people interested in Bloodlines 2 are not those players. These are just RPG players who are not used to paying for clans, paying extra to get the full experience, and being able to just make your character at the start of the game, to have that locked away. Not many CRPGs have done it. I could think of a couple of examples like Mass Effect 3, I think I threw out there, where that kind of happened, but they did DLC classes later, I think, long after release. It wasn't at launch, I don't think. So this was very greedy from Paradox to have clans behind this expansion pass. People were pissed, and rightly so. Then what happened, it felt like hours later, maybe it was a day or two later, the Chinese Room announced that they had the answers, and they were listening. They were keeping an eye on things, and they were going to solve this problem. So stay tuned. We're going to do an emergency podcast video stream in a few days, and we're going to address this. Now, that sounded a little bit suspicious to me, given that they've obviously been planning this for a while. The game's been in development for 6 years. I know there's been the problems, but still, you'd think they've had a lot of notice to get this right, the release date, the marketing behind it, how much is it all going to cost? And then they announce that. There's a bit of controversy about the paid clans, and then all of a sudden, oh, they're scrambling, no, we're going to change things, stay tuned, we're going to address this in a couple of days. Now, they did that 6 or so days ago. They did this stream, they did this new announcement, as you can see here on the screen, where they've changed how this works. No longer are the paid clans behind a paywall. It's all part of the base game. You're going to get everything. Don't worry, guys. We were greedy before. No longer. We're going to give you everything. You're going to get all 6 playable clans. That's it. There still is an expansion pass. However, in this expansion pass, you're not paying for extra clans. You're actually going to get story packs. The Loose Cannon and the Flower and the Flame story packs sometime next year. So they've totally changed it up. You get all the clans, and if you want the expansion pass, or if you've already bought it, then you're going to get some story packs later on. So you're still going to be taken care of. It's all going to be totally fine. And what happened then? After this announcement, it seems it totally eased fans' concerns. They solved this problem about the paid clans of being too greedy. They've listened. It's no longer an issue. It's now a pretty standard release of, here's the game. If you want to pre-order the expansion pass, you'll also get some more content, some DLC next year. That's more traditional. It's not just stuff that should have been in the base game, essentially. So they've done it. They've solved the problem. Well done to Paradox. Well done to the Chinese room. It does sound a little bit suspicious. And it sounds suspicious because it just seems like this is a game that had no enthusiasm whatsoever. Probably still doesn't in the grand scheme of things. I don't think that mainstream gamers give a shit about this game. But for a title that people were just mocking and enthusiasm was absolute rock bottom, I am now seeing a little bit more praise. People are more open-minded, and that's the phrase that's doing the rounds everywhere, is they're listening to the fans. This is great, and they deserve praise. Now, obviously, from the way this has gone, I don't agree with this. What it seems like to me is that Paradox just conjured this whole thing up to finally create some sort of positive PR. There's nothing to get positive about when it comes to the game itself, the content inside. It's not even trying to be the original anyway. It's not trying to be a spiritual successor. It's not even really an RPG. That's what most of the people with some sort of credibility who've played the game have said. There's shill articles that try and say, we're going back, this is it. But anyone with some sort of credibility is admitting, no, this isn't an RPG. Fans are going to be extremely disappointed. Nothing to get excited about here. And that has been felt. People are just not talking positively about the game in these communities until now. So it does seem like Paradox did come up with this scheme, which it's not the first time this has happened. They're not that innovative. I think this does actually happen quite a lot, but it stands out here because of the fact that there's nothing to get excited about with the game. Now, the scheme, if it's not obvious, is that a few weeks ago, they announced the game's release date. They announced that there's going to be paid clans that you'll have to pay extra for. People get mad. They do an emergency stream where they go, no, we're listening. We're going to change all that. You're going to get all the clans in the base game. You won't have to pay extra. And we're going to put in some story expansions instead. If you want to get those, totally optional. But you're going to get everything at release. Come on, we're listening, this is it. And then you start getting the positive reactions of, how can we be mad? They've listened. They really are listening to the fans. Maybe the game. Maybe they're listening with that as well. Maybe it's not as bad as we think. Maybe we've overreacted. Seems these devs are good guys. What else are they doing? What else are they listening with? This could be really good. And I've got to say, it's a tough one. It's sort of a tough one to tackle. Because it's like, if you come up with that conspiracy theory, if you wear the tinfoil hat with this one, it's very easy just to criticize this video, to criticize anyone saying anything like what I'm saying, and just say, you're just going to complain about anything. It doesn't matter what they do, you're going to come up with some sort of narrative that suggests these devs suck and the game sucks and there's nothing that they can't do anything right, basically. No matter what road they go down, you'll have some reason to criticize them for it. And it's not a bad defense, so I get it. I had to think about this as well. But I think that there are some clues to suggest this is what happened. First of all, how quickly they responded. Again, with the amount of time this game has been in the oven, that a little bit of criticism in a day or two, and suddenly you're changing all your plans, suddenly the clans are not behind the paywall. To have that happen so quickly does seem a little bit sus. And also the fact that this, to me, was the biggest clue in all of it, was that they didn't just put all of the clans in the base game. They all of a sudden had these extra DLCs that they announced. These were not part of the plans even a few weeks ago, at least publicly. I mean, they might have been. Maybe they were keeping them secret. But a few weeks ago, they didn't mention them. They just said, if you get the expansion pass, you'll just get some playable clans. But then they do a 180, and then all of a sudden they say, no, actually, if you buy the expansion pass, you're going to get 2 story expansions. Where did they come from? Did they just all of a sudden go, oh no, people are criticizing us about the clans. Quick, let's whip up some campaigns that are going to cost us a lot of money to produce. And if you go back, you'll remember the CEO of Paradox basically said, we're done with this. We're not doing any extra DLCs. We're not doing any extra story DLCs. He might not have used those words, but he was very clear that they were done with the game. He said that months ago, which was just another sign that they do not care about Bloodlines. They just want to get it out the door and just try and recover costs where they can. This game is probably not going to turn a profit, and then they're going to move on from anything to do with Bloodlines. The CEO said that not long ago. But then because of a tiny bit of controversy, all of a sudden they're doing story expansions next year. It doesn't really add up to me. So it just seems very obvious that they were never planning to put the clans behind a paywall. They always had these DLC story expansions in the works. They didn't just all of a sudden come up with them. They were always going to be part of the expansion pass. This was always it. In fact, if you go back to the original pre-orders, they promised that you would get DLC in them. And that's why I found it weird when the CEO was talking about no more expansions. I thought, no, you've already charged people for that because you've had the pre-orders up forever. So that seems odd. So, to me, I think he probably just forgot. It's probably not his highest priority, Bloodlines 2. He probably didn't even know about that. But I'm sure the company as a whole has always known this, that they needed to produce some sort of story DLC to honor those pre-orders. So it just feels like sort of a bait and switch, essentially, just a way to produce some positive PR. And it's kind of a shame, because it feels like most of the time, people either won't see through it or they don't want to see through it. There's a number of people with Bloodlines especially where they're looking for an excuse to praise it, and maybe nostalgia kind of takes over. I think for most people, they're just over that. If you go back in the first few years of this, people wanted to love it. They were hoping there was something special here, and when there were development turmoil issues, people were hoping, oh no, maybe they'll give it to a new studio and they'll correct course and things will be fine. People thought maybe the Chinese room have got something cooking here. It's been obvious for the last couple of years that is definitely not going to happen. So most people have totally moved on, but there are some people trying to really push this now of, oh look, the devs are listening to the fans. Even on Reddit, where there's been nothing positive for years at this point about this game, all of a sudden it's, yes, I think the decision to paywall, this person says, the 2 clans was most likely the publisher, not the devs, but either way, it's great that they listened and they fixed that decision. Looking forward to the game. There was nothing to look forward to, though. What has this got to do with the game's quality in any way? And that's what I mean when I say people almost projecting this whole thing onto the game's quality, where it's like, oh, well, they listened about the paid clans, maybe the game's going to be good. I don't think so. There's nothing to suggest that the game is going to be of any sort of quality if you're expecting something like the original Bloodlines. I don't think it's going to be the worst thing ever, but it's not a Bloodlines game. The whole thing is a bait and switch. Not just this thing, the paid clan switch, but the game itself is a bait and switch. Because they market it to you as originally back in 2017, when they probably got most of the pre-orders, as being a spiritual successor to Bloodlines. Now, they're going to deliver the pre-order, but you're not getting that. You're just getting some linear vampire game where you can choose your hair at the start of the title. You can choose a clan, but it maybe affects a few combat abilities. It's not a CRPG in any way whatsoever like the original was. So the idea that they're fake listening now, and that means the game might actually be better than we're expecting, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's just more cope. I think people weren't coping for the longest period of time they moved on, but this has given them something to think about, something to hold on to, a last little straw to grasp, basically. And this is also in the videos. It's probably more prevalent in some of these videos on the World of Darkness YouTube channel, where a good suggestion I saw is if you go to the comments and you just Control F, listen, how many times are we going to see it? I think it had 60 plus results or something. So this is much better this direction. Thank you for listening to the fans. Now, some of these are probably botted. It seems like not all of these people are real. This person is, but most of the people who are saying this, if you go on their page, they're basically shills for the game, essentially. So most of the people saying they're listening already wanted to love it. Big respect for listening to your fans. Thanks for listening. This is a day one purchase. What have we got? Not many companies listen to their community, and I like rewarding it whenever I see it. I'll be buying the game. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening. We are so back. Feels like a good choice that you listen to the player base. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. It says a lot. I could go through this 60 plus times. Wouldn't that be thrilling? So this is where we basically are. Company creates a problem, solves the problem, but they probably didn't actually do anything. This was probably always what they were expecting to do. They knew there'd be a little bit of backlash, and because the game already had no enthusiasm, things couldn't really get any worse. So I can give Paradox some praise that this was a good idea. It's the first time they've created any enthusiasm, and they had nothing to lose. It's like everyone already hated this. Everyone who could potentially criticize us already is. We're not going to lose anyone extra over this, really, because the people who were still pre-ordered, they're all in. Nothing's going to turn them off at this point with just how bad it has all looked. So it's like, we'll create this controversy. It makes us look bad. We'll solve it in a few days. All of a sudden, we look pro-consumer, even though they've just turned this into just your bog standard, I wouldn't call this a AAA game, but that sort of release, where it's the game and there'll be some DLC story stuff later, that's pretty standard for most games these days. They haven't done anything special, but now they get all this praise about listening to the fans, and they're doing such a fantastic thing, when previously, the original monetization announcement was almost doing something unprecedented. It was that scummy. It was unprecedented. Now it's special, apparently. So, seems it's worked. There's some people back on the hype train, whether it's bots or it's genuine, I don't really know. So if nothing else, this is sort of just a lesson in how the industry seems to work from a PR, monetization perspective. The actual Bloodlines part of it, who really cares at this point? It's going to come out, not enough people are going to buy it, it's going to be a flop, they're not going to get their money back, and there's not going to be any positive word of mouth at release because it's not a Bloodlines game. It is just a bait and switch, but maybe this will work to suck a few more people in. It seems to have, given the amount of listening to the fans, whether it's botted or not. But that's basically it. We'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.